Hi, welcome to our production this evening. Thank you for joining us at the NEP for our first virtual event of the 2021 season. This will be the first of many events to come, and tonight's event is presented in conjunction with the Boston New Music Festival. My name is Eric Nathan, and I'm composer in residence with the New England Philharmonic. I'm joined tonight with co-host NEP's concertmaster Danielle Madden and featured composer TJ Cole, whose music we'll be discussing this evening. It's great to have you both here, TJ and Danny. Welcome.
Great to be here.
Yeah.
And so for tonight's program, listening in a deep dive with the music, into the music with the NEP, we'll be taking a closer look at two of TJ's compositions, Nightscape for orchestra and Playtime for string sextet. We'll be going under the hood of the music in a sense, hearing from TJ, but also Danny and me as we listen in to the music and hopefully help you as our audience hear it in new ways. The NEP's general manager, Daniel Freiberg, will be moderating the chat tonight on YouTube. And so we encourage you to post questions at any point, and we hope to include your questions in the discussion at various points. So tonight I thought we'd start with Nightscape. The NEP had programmed it on our season opening concert this fall, though sadly we weren't able to gather together to perform this fall due to COVID. But tonight we wanted to feature this especially. And so I know the work has been performed by a number of orchestras. It was premiered by the Curtis Symphony, and the Minnesota Orchestra also performed it. And that also, TJ, you've written many works for orchestra. So I thought we'd start off wondering what has drawn you to writing for the orchestra?
Well, I first got interested in composition through John Williams' film music, which is just like pretty much all orchestra music. So that was my introduction into just like being a living composer, because I didn't know you could be a living composer until I heard John Williams' film music. So I think from an early age, I think I'd like started listening to his music when I was maybe 9 or 10. That was like my first idea of like what it is to be a composer, is like you write orchestra music for film. And obviously I don't write for film now, but I still really love working with large sound worlds just because there's so many color possibilities. Yeah,
I think some of my way into music was also through John Williams' film score.
I've heard so many composers say this. He's been so influential to the composition world. It's amazing.
Yeah, Star Wars, Superman.
Yeah, E.T. Yeah.
So I think I remember that you played in orchestras growing up. Is that right?
Sort of.
Sort of.
I started playing cello with my middle school orchestra, and that got me into playing with some like local youth string orchestras. I never played in a full orchestra, just string orchestra. So I also really like writing for strings because I have like a very small string background. Yeah, and I was in choir for a little bit, and those are the two experiences I've had in being in like a large ensemble.
I found that I played trumpet in orchestras growing up, and the act of being in the ensemble, as Danny knows very well, gives a kind of perspective also of what it's like to be in a large ensemble and making these larger works come alive. And
yeah,
especially in the string musical here, but your playtime, if the act of experimenting with, or the physical act of playing an instrument has inspired you in your process in any way.
Yeah. So this is kind of a funny story. When I was at college at Curtis, I had a bunch of violinists as roommates, and I would always ask to play their violins to like figure out the violin parts that I was writing for, which is amazing that they would let me like play on their beautiful instruments, because I was probably just like hacking away at them. I don't play violin. But because I would play on their instruments so much, they bought me a violin, like really cheap one, but they got me my own violin. And I used that to compose I use my violin to compose music more than I use like any other instrument now. So I wrote a lot of playtime on my violin that I don't know how to play, which might be dangerous to the performer, but it did open up the possibility of like different kinds of sounds you can make and thinking outside the box of like what a violin can do.
Absolutely, yeah. In undergrad, I bought a violin on eBay, I think for about
Nice.
$20, and then I went to the music store and got a neck rest, which was $23, and it
Nice.
really changed how I was as a trumpet player. I was writing a lot of fourths and fifths in my melodies, and really changed how I wrote for the violin. To being able to,
Mm.
I don't sound very good on it, but I think
It's
similarly,
hard. I mean,
it's fun to experiment with it.
yeah, I should really buy a brass instrument. That's like something I haven't had a lot of experience like hacking around on. It'd be
And
really different.
those are hard.
Yeah.
But they're fun too. So I thought we'd begin taking a look at Nightscape, and it has a really evocative title. I was wondering if what's behind the title in this work, if there's some imagery or inspiration. I know that you've had some inspiration from artworks in the past in some of your works.
Yeah. In general, I'm a very visually inspired creative person, I guess. And Nightscape was originally a commissioned work, and it was to respond to a prompt about stargazing. And I was writing it just after I had spent a summer working in northern Michigan in like the middle of nowhere, where there was just like amazing stargazing. So I was thinking about my experience, like getting to look at like the constellations in the sky. And I remember one night I was laying outside, and like I was looking, sometimes when you look at things for too long, they like start to like shift around a little bit, and it like becomes this like illusion. And I remember like at one point the stars just like felt like they were like falling or something. I don't know. So yeah, I was with the opening of Nightscape in particular, I was thinking about like what it's like to like slowly look up at the sky, and like what it's like when things like kind of shift and like turn around. And yeah.
No, I can totally hear that in the music. So I wonder if maybe we get some sounds in our ears, hear the opening of Nightscape here. I'm pulling up the recording here. So you can take a listen to the first minute and a half of Nightscape performed by the Curtis Symphony Orchestra. Beautiful. So I don't know, Danny, what do you hear here at the beginning of this?
I love the slowly rising, gliding sounds in the strings. And one of the lines is rising and another one is falling, descending. And that sort of diversion, it makes me think, well, maybe the moon is rising and the sun is setting because of the divergence of the two directions. And TJ, I think it's glissandos that you're writing, gliding between the pitches, which is unearthly and beautiful, sort of not of this world. So yes, stars come to mind. And those fluttering figures that come in the woodwinds a little bit later are just so evocative. For me, they sounded like birds settling in a branch at night, getting ready, for the long night ahead. My one question for you is, it doesn't exactly sound like an urban nightscape or not exactly like a rural nightscape. So was there a particular place that inspired you?
That's a good point. Yeah, I mean, in northern Michigan, I mean, where I was working the summer, I guess just before I wrote this piece, I was, what was it like? I mean, it was pretty much like in the middle of the woods, very, very natural landscapes. There's like lake, trees, stars, no light pollution. So definitely not urban. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I love that, the opening, just unveiling motion of these glissandos. And then we get to this tall chord with what Danny described as bird calls. I almost think of it if you're looking into a pond and you see the stars and there's some ripples there, the kind of stars in ripples in the pond, and these chords that gradually transform, they keep converging and coming together, almost like if you're stargazing and you see one constellation, but then you can pick out, here's a different picture or animal that I can find in the stars above. So that's kind of what I was thinking of when I was listening to it. So I thought we actually take a look at the score, and we're going to listen to it again so our audience can keep some of these things in mind as they listen. And as Danny described, we have here this, you can see here we have the violin 1, 2, and the viola and cello and the double bass. This is all we have at the opening, just the strings. And we have this starting pitch. Everyone's beginning here, the violins and the cello on C, just a unison kind of focal point. And then the top line, glissandos, has this gradual smearing going up to this arrival chord, and the cellos are going gradually down. And we have this kind of unfolding outwards, which perhaps something that you can listen for. And then this arrival point at the next page is what I feel like in this piece. We have these two motives, this idea of the kind of converging and retransforming that we have in a lengthy version at the beginning, but then here down the strings, we keep having this transforming. And what's happening here is that some strings are glissandoing down, some are glissandoing up, and so this chord kind of like merges and re-emerges, and we get another iteration of these with these kind of bird calls or ripples in the top, at least how Danny and I hear it. How are we? Are we on to something?
I think, I mean, I've always found it really interesting to hear how people visualize things differently in music. I mean, when I was writing it, I was thinking about like glimmering stars, which is, I mean, not that far off, but it's, I don't know, it's cool that different people can hear it differently. It's cool.
Yeah, I think that's what I find such the beauty of music is that, especially if we have no text in a purely instrumental work, how perhaps when we're creating something, we're creating something that's meaningful. We may try to impart specific meaning, but then it's really left up to the performers and the audience to determine their own meaning. And I sometimes think that the personal meaning that an audience member may bring to it themselves may be even more powerful than if we're saying this is exactly what you need to hear is these things. But I think Nightscape gives a nice lens that invites different interpretations. We have a question about Nightscape. As you composed this, did you actively think back to your time stargazing?
I did. It was sort of a combination of thinking back to my experience stargazing and like looking at the sky for too long and like watching things like shift around without actually moving. But also a combination of watching YouTube videos of constellations and just, I mean, like, you know, if you watch like NASA videos, they're just like these like huge like constellations that just like kind of shift around and kind of do this sort of motion. Um, so a merging of the two, maybe.
That's really interesting. Yeah, no, I
YouTube really changed my life.
yeah, finding different ways to inspire one to figure out what music to write in and what gestures or textures. There's such a huge palette with the orchestra, and I think the blank page can always be quite daunting, but to have specific points of inspiration that can lead you in one direction that you can then specialize, having some restrictions or just a point to jump off of.
Yeah.
So I thought we'd listen to it a second time. So keeping in mind here, if you can really listen for the notes in the violins going up and the cellos coming down, and then on the second page here, hearing these high flutes and clarinets trilling sounds, and then in the bottom, this motive of the merging kind of the chords changing underneath. So let's take another listen to this opening. So I really hear these two ideas, the first page and the second page, as the first idea and the second idea as two main ideas that are in dialogue, and they grow and over the course of this work up until we have this climax here where we see, it seems to me in a sense, them superimposed on top of each other, where we have these repeated notes in the upper winds like we had before, but and the glissandos underneath, then leading to a gradual return to a focal pitch at the end, this glissando down and glissando up till we get this single pitch G, kind of like where we began. Sorry, oops, trying to get back here. Anyways, hold on, I'll pull out of this for a second. So how did you think about form when you're structuring the overall work after you began with it?
I think it just kind of came about organically. I tend to start writing from the beginning, and it kind of grows out of whatever the beginning is. I think I knew that I wanted it to become really big at one point. Just because I don't know. I mean, when you're looking at the sky, it's like, it's huge, it's vast, it's overwhelming. And I like really wanted to try and like, not only literally do that by using the entire orchestra, but like kind of capture that feeling of like, this is just like so much.
Mm.
And then, I mean, the form just kind of grew out of like trying to connect those two ideas to make something that was like coherent.
I really liked also, not only are you using the palette of the instruments for color, but you're playing with pacing and sounds that are becoming and dying away and becoming and dying away. And that big, when things get loud and massive, the sense of rotation is really there with the glissandos and the strings. You feel as if the large constellations are moving, or we on the earth are rotating, and it appears that they're moving. The static pace of it, it takes you to a very calm, meditative place, and also a visual place, because you're thinking, what is it that I'm hearing? And you think of the old expression, music of the spheres. It's just beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
So maybe we listen to the full work here and can take a listen to this now. Okay. Great. We have two questions about string writing. The first is about Nightscape. Are there special techniques in the strings that the strings need to do to perform this? And then a question for TJ, do you listen to alternative music, especially jazz, to see what a violin can do? Maybe Danny, for the first question, what would it be like for the string section of the NEP to play this? Are these special techniques? What would playing this piece be like?
These are really standard techniques that TJ is using in a very creative way. When we first learn how to shift, of course, we're gliding from note to note, and then gradually, we put our fingers down in position. But that gliding motion from pitch to pitch is something that's really fundamental for us. And the NEP has played a good number of pieces with that glissando technique. I love also when in the big, louder passage where she writes tenuto under some of the string notes. That's a really beautiful stroke, a bow stroke that we work on our whole lives, portato, which is, just sort of stroking each note as they go by. So these are really fundamental techniques, but used in a very creative way.
And TJ, do you listen to music outside of the classical tradition? Does it influence you in your, we'll be looking at Playtime, which has a lot of unusual string techniques coming up, where you get your ideas?
Yeah, when I was listening to Nightscape, I was listening to a lot of orchestral music. I was studying orchestral music to prepare for writing Nightscape. In the past, I have listened to country fiddling for inspiration for string writing, not for Nightscape, maybe a little bit for Playtime, but not actively. But when I was writing Playtime, which I guess we'll listen to later, I wasn't listening to any classical music. I was mostly listening to pop. I am in a synth pop band, and we have been teaching ourselves to produce and engineer dance music. And going into that world and working with electronics for the first time has totally changed how I write notated music. It's just completely gotten me off of what I thought the page was capable of doing. So I guess, yeah, depending on what sort of phase I'm going through, I'm usually listening to one kind of music, but it's constantly changing, whatever that phase is.
Great. Well, I think that's a good segue into Playtime, to talk a little bit about this work. Seems to me to be both experimental and have quite a bit of humor in it. And so few pieces of music, regardless of genre, it's not a common thing we see humor in music, but I think it's something that is really welcome, and it's a daily part of human existence. How do you think about humor in music? Did you think about that as you were writing this piece?
Yeah, I did. As I've gotten more work in classical music and been in the classical environment for longer, I've found that there's not a lot of humor in the concert hall, which it tends to create this very sort of serious mentality when you're in the concert hall. But some of the best concerts I've been to have been ones where people feel like they can laugh while they're listening to somebody play. So I was definitely thinking about humor and wanting people to feel open and they could engage with what they were listening with, but then also just being humorous with myself and not trying to take my writing so seriously, because I think I had sort of gotten in a headspace of doing that, and just trying to break out of that for myself too.
Yeah, Danny, do you want to lead us into some of the things you were thinking about for this work?
Sure. Introducing this piece, Playtime, I think TJ, it's 2019 you wrote it, and she titles it 10 miniatures for string sextet, which is, 2 violins, 2 violas, 2 cellos. The piece is about 25 minutes long, and we will be listening to 5 of the 10 movements. And the entire piece, there will be a link to the entire piece so you can hear it. It is so well worth hearing the entire piece. But from these 5 movements that we'll be listening to, we'll explore some of the musical tools that TJ used to create these pieces that are remarkable. And before we start in, TJ, did you have a specific inspiration for this piece?
Yeah, a lot. I'm in my late 20s, and like as I've acquired adult responsibilities the last few years, I've just become really nostalgic for childhood. And when you're an adult, it's taboo to like want to like play with toys or like play on the playground or just like play tag with your friends. And I think as adults we find these other ways of like entertaining ourselves, but I really just wanted to tap into the like really purest version of just like having fun.
Mm-hmm.
So to prep for playtime, I made this huge list of toys, games, any sort of like childlike memorabilia. I like asked all my friends and my family, and I just built up this huge list. And then I wrote all my favorites on index cards, and I just like started pairing them together to see like what sparked any sort of like sound ideas. So that was kind of the inspiration for the piece.
It's so cool. The movements, each of the 10 movements, they're small in size and in duration perhaps, but each one is a powerhouse of depiction. Like, I love the descriptive titles, and I love how strongly you manage to depict the subject matter of each movement. And for folks who are wondering, and I certainly wonder, is it challenging to write something of a short duration? Like, is there more distilling, or is it difficult to get it all down to 1 minute, 30 seconds? Or
it can be. I think for this, well, yeah, it really depends. I think for this piece, it felt really easy to like just like stick with one idea per miniature and just like tried to do everything I could with like one idea in like a short amount of time. I don't know. It honestly just depends on the piece.
okay.
Yeah.
I like the little snapshot, sort of tiny portrait idea of the 10 movements very much. And we'll listen to 5 tonight, but when you listen to the whole piece, there are very cool characters, including clouds, insects, a rebellious clock, a carousel with crazy sized animals, and insect sounds and glitter bees. And it's wonderful to listen to because it makes you smile right away. And the piece gives me a lot of energy when I hear it. So moving on to the first movement, it's called Rainbow Train Tag. It's about 2 minutes long. And we're going to listen to it since it's so short, and then we'll talk about it and listen once more. So here is the first movement, Rainbow Train Tag. That's amazing. TJ, tell me if I'm in the ballpark, but it sounds to me like there are two main musical sort of mottos here, which obviously are the chugging of the train, and that's in the fast 16th notes, with accents. And then, and you see it on the page, those accented 16ths with just motor kind of motion straight ahead. And then the other motive, the sort of, if you want to call it melodic idea, of the sustained double pitches that glide from low to high and low again, which I think the train whistle. And I think it's also a perfect illustration of the Doppler effect where, you know, as the sound comes towards you, it gets higher, and as it recedes, it gets lower. So I thought that was just geeking out on it a little bit. I thought that was very cool. Is this more or less right? Or
Yeah, definitely.
okay. And
Yeah.
what's really fun about this piece is then what happens during the piece. And if you notice it, it starts with just one train whistle, chugging along, trying to get up to speed. The whole piece accelerates. And as this one train accelerates, he is joined by other trains. Maybe he's going into a station or a platform or something, but he gets closer to other trains. You hear a lot more whistles overlapping, and everything becomes more insistent and quicker. There's a dramatic moment at the end when all the trains whistle in unison, and I can only think that that's where they all say to the one train, "Tag, you're it," and then they all speed off again. So shall we listen to it again and listen for those elements of the chugging and the whistle and then the accelerating tempo?
Sure. All right, here we go. Rainbow Train Tag.
Wow, that's so cool. Eric,
I
what
never
are you?
thought about the tag you're it moment, but I really love that now. That wasn't intentional, but I really like that.
That's great.
Yeah.
It's such a fun piece, and it's such a great use of the strings and the different techniques that we can do. And here comes the second movement, which is called Bubble Bright Popcorn. And TJ, is this a brand of popcorn or a popper or just a name?
It's just kind of a name. With the bright part, I was thinking of light brights. It doesn't really pertain to any part of this miniature, but I loved light brights as a kid. And I thought it just made a really fun title. And then, yeah, the bubbles, you know, it's like, kind of sounds like bubbles popping, sound like really similar to popcorn. Sometimes, so, especially when you try and recreate it on the strings, they sound really similar to me, so.
Well, and as we listen to this second movement, Bubble Bright Popcorn, just for everyone to realize that the strings in this movement are only playing pizzicato, plucking the strings with their bows not in use. And I'm sure your violinist friends told you how happy they were to occasionally put the bow down on the stand and just, you know, use the right hand.
It was either that or they were worried about getting calluses on their hands. So these performers had really great spirits about the piece. I'm grateful they didn't complain about that because I was genuinely worried.
Well, let's enjoy listening to this second movement, Bubble Bright Popcorn.
I love the few extra pops that always happens in the machine, that still one that needs to still go at the end.
You never know when the last one is going to be.
I love how the beginning sounds so random, just as if you're really popping corn, but yet you notate it so precisely. It's a marvel to look at the score and see, you know, the exact number of rests, and even though the pitches at first are indeterminate, I think you say the highest part of the fingerboard that you can. It's so precise, and yet it sounds perfectly random. So that's a real bravo from me for that. And then
I
just
had written more random. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, actually, looking back on it, I wish I had written it to be a bit more random, because I don't know. I don't feel like there's like a point to having it all lined up in time, but I'm glad it sounds random. That's good.
Is there any process that you use to figure out where to put the notes, or is it more intuitive of creating a building of textural density?
That's cool.
Oh, I was asking, was there?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, was there a process? Just repetitive listening, really. And spreading it out over time, like not just listening to it back to back, but like coming back to it the next day and being like, okay, does this sound random? Does this sound like it's a rhythm yet? Like, when does it start to sound like a rhythm? And just like over time, like gradually making like little changes here and there.
Yeah. Sorry, Danny.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, you do so much with the pacing and spacing of the notes. It's like almost like a little ABA form. When things heat up and the notes become more solid, as you could see in the second stave, it's almost as if it gets into a little groove, and there's a little sort of a jazzy rhythm going on as the majority of the kernels are popping. But you're right, Eric, there's always that one last pop that scares the bejesus out of you when you think, oh, I can open the lid, and smack, it comes up. So that was very well done. And why not listen to it one more time, since it's so short?
I find too that in concerts we only usually get to hear something once, and then with a new piece you go home and there may not be a recording yet available of it. So today we are wanting to play things twice so you get a chance of hearing it a second time, which may take a while to do in the concert hall, but here we can easily hear it a second time and can listen in even more to what we've been talking about. So here's the second movement again.
Very cool. So we're going to now go to the movement called Wind Up Swing Set. And for this one, we're going to look at it first and then listen to it. The three main ideas here, the musical ideas, TJ, correct me if I'm wrong, there's the wind up on the bottom of the page, the bottom left, the crunch bows in the cello, crunch, crunch, crunch. And I think that's the key, winding the toy up. And then the swinging sound, which you can see in the violins, in the second violin, sort of the arcing notes that arc up and then down and up, down and up. So ba-yup, ba-yup. And then the creaking or squeaking sound of the ropes on the pole or the gears made by the single harmonics on the top line of the staff there. It's a really great squeaky sound that we can make with harmonics. And I think you'll enjoy that. And the other thing that I'd like to point out about this piece is, and I was delighted to realize this, is TJ, that you depicted entropy, in that it takes energy to get things in motion. And when the energy dissipates, things slow down and stop. So more wind-ups are necessary. So the first wind-up we see on the bottom left was 3 times. The next time it comes, it's 4 times. And the swings go a little bit faster and a little longer. And the last time it's 6 wind-ups. Then it goes like crazy. So let's listen to this really delightful piece. Was there actually a swing set that you had, that a wind-up toy, or?
No, I just like the idea of trying to put those two together.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. What I did was I found recordings of swing sets online. And I used like a GarageBand like program to just stack the audio clips on top of each other and then just tried to notate it out.
That's very cool.
Internet.
Loved it.
Amazing.
So now let's look at the ninth movement, the Ooey Gooey nursery rhyme. And of course, I'm going to ask you, TJ, was this an actual little tune that you knew growing up, or did you make it up on the fly?
This was just something I made up. I didn't know if it would be useful for this piece, but I mean, yeah, I wrote like a little melody thinking like it might be useful somewhere, and then it ended up becoming this. So.
Okay, so what I find interesting in this piece is that there's a very straightforward nursery tune, sort of in B major at the beginning, the first 4 bars. Very normal sounding tune that goes on a little journey. And after that first 4 bars, things start happening to the music. And TJ writes, as if the melody melts and oozes. So I'm thinking, of course, does it pass under a heat lamp, or what's making it melt and ooze? And it really does sound like melting and oozing. So what we should listen for is that well-defined pitch at the beginning starts to distort and warp. It becomes out of tune, although the rhythm plods on. The forward motion is sort of stalled and slowed down, like you're stepping in a glue trap or chewing gum. But that tune persists and somehow makes it through more or less intact and calm. So let's listen now to Ooey Gooey nursery rhyme. Bravo.
TJ, I wonder if could you introduce the last movement here for us? How we're back to the ideas of stars, like we began, in a sense, back to the sky from this nightscape.
Yeah. I love any night related themes. Yeah, with this one, I was there's this pattern that you can see in the second violin. It sounds like the same note, but like you're kind of ping ponging with your hand. And this was just something I like discovered playing around on the violin. But yeah, I wanted something that was like really soothing, kind of dreamy, but then also just like a lot of like this back and forth motion, either like with one person playing on their instrument or like between different instruments.
Yeah, for those of you who aren't familiar with string notation, that you can see here, this pitch here, this is a D harmonic that the player plays on the third string, and then glisses to another harmonic here, but it actually sounds exactly the same pitch of D, but it's just a different place on the string. So you get this sense of glissando, like we heard in Nightscape, moving, but it ends up where it began. So there's this kind of return and motion away into a new pitch, which is the same where we began. Danny, did you have any other things you wanted to mention in this before we begin?
Oh, sure. Of course, in addition to the ping ponging that we see, there's also a slow, stately sounds that come in the viola and cello. They start there. They start very smoothly. TJ writes legato, smooth. And this is the sort of counterpart to the ping-pongy idea of the shooting star, something that's very still and static. I was thinking maybe it's the constellations of the night sky that don't appear to move in relation to this beautiful moving shooting star arc. So shall we listen to this beautiful movement? It starts out so quietly, it waxes and then it wanes again.
Yes, so this is the final movement of Playtime. It's about 7 minutes long. And after this, if you can think up any questions you want to ask about Playtime or anything else, we'll have some minutes for questions after this is done, and I'll provide the link. We'll provide the link to you if you want to listen to the full work on your own online. So here is Ping Pong Shooting Star.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
And here's where you can stream the full recording at TJ's website, and we'll post a link in the chat. I wanted to tell everyone that this work in the spring won ASCAP's Leo Kaplan Award, which is the highest award given in the annual ASCAP Morton Gould Young Composer Award competition. It really is such a work that is, there's so much joy and playfulness, and also such a clear concept of where the inspiration comes from, but at the same time deeply meaningful and beautiful. So especially in this last movement here, it's gorgeous music.
Thank you so much.
So yeah, congratulations.
Thank you.
So we'd like to open it up if there are any questions about this work or anything else you'd like to ask. I do see one here. What is your favorite John Williams score and why? Going back a little bit earlier, teachers from today.
Oh my gosh, there's so many. I really loved this one. So I had a CD of like John Williams' greatest hits or something. And there was this one short song from Jane Eyre on there. And I think it had a harpsichord in it, and I'd never heard a harpsichord before. And it was just like super fast, super energetic. And I loved that track. I would play it on repeat all the time. That was one of my favorites. I also loved E.T., Harry Potter, Star Wars, all of Star Wars. It's hard to name a favorite. So many good ones.
They're all great, and so many are different too. Catch Me If You Can is quite different than some of the other ones.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As a cellist, you might like the theme from Jaws, right?
Oh yeah. That's a really different one too. Yeah.
We have another question. What new projects have you been working on recently, TJ?
Right now I'm working on a couple things. I'm working on a synth pop album with my band Twin Pixie. We just released a single, Lunacy, that you can find on Spotify and Apple Music and whatnot, which is really different from anything you've heard tonight. But I'm also working on, it kind of relates to playtime. When I was a kid, I played piano and I wrote a bunch of piano pieces. And one of them was called Happy Harp, and it was trying to imitate the harp. And right now I'm working on rearranging it for 3 tubas.
That's quite different. Very cool.
You know who wrote a tuba concerto, by the way, is John Williams, right?
Yeah, that's right.
No, we should have much more music for tuba. It's a fantastic instrument. Tuba trio, I'm sure that'll get played a lot.
We'll see.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. I don't. If we have any other questions, we can ask them one more. What is your listening regimen? Do you listen for pleasure or is it work?
It's both. I listen to a lot of music for pleasure, mostly pop, indie, and rock music. Also, I've been trying to listen to a lot more electronic music because I'm sort of in the process of learning how to produce electronic music. But like with this tuba piece, I'm listening to some tuba music because I'm really not that familiar with tuba writing. So a little bit of both. Just depends on what I'm working on.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, TJ, thank you so much for joining us, and also our audience here online. Thank you so much for joining us. If you enjoyed this program, please consider making a donation to the NEP to support future events like this. Your contribution goes completely to the programming of our season, and your support is greatly appreciated. And you can make a donation through the link in the bio below. A special thanks to TJ for giving us permission to share her score and recordings. You can please join us on nephilharmonic.org to stay up to date on NEP events and stay up to date with the NEP by finding us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And this event was part of the virtual Boston New Music Festival, and you can find a full lineup on the festival website, which is also linked in the bio below. So thank you all so much for joining us. I had a really wonderful time discussing these works with you. all, and looking forward to the next time.
Yeah, this is fun. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thanks, you guys.